moderator for this week's webinar. Welcome to Payment Week's third in a series of 4 webinars focusing on Bitcoin and digital currency regulation. Every Tuesday this month, we'll be delving into some critical issues that digital currency businesses, users, and regulators are facing. This is our third webinar, and next week we'll be delving into the digital currency Bitcoin regulatory environment worldwide. So hope you stay tuned. Going back to last week, we discussed the intersection of Bitcoin and Wall Street and how institutional investors are set to enter the digital currency space. We were privileged to have Second Market's Barry Silbert, General Counsel of Circle Internet Financial, John Becchia, and Shaker Ravan, Vice President of Digital Asset Management at Strevis, who partook in a very rousing discussion on the regulatory hurdles and challenges that investment firms face today on Wall Street. The difficulty in classifying Bitcoin has also created problems in nailing down exactly which regulators have sway in overseeing the investment side of Bitcoin. With the CFTC, Federal Reserve, the IRS, New York Division Financial Services, the CFPB, and other state governments attempting to assert their jurisdiction. Today, during this webinar, we're going to take a look at the consumer side of Bitcoin and specifically concentrate on Bitcoin ATMs. It's a form factor and process that consumers are familiar with, and many of the Bitcoin space hope that these machines that have been popping around the world will drive the adoption of digital currencies. With Bitcoin ATMs, however, comes the need for unique AML, KYC, and customer protection compliance issues. And so we'll take a look at how providers in this space are managing these challenges. We'll also discuss the difficulties in creating a Bitcoin business from the ground up. Now I'd like to introduce our distinguished speakers for this webinar. We have participation of 2 CEOs from leading Bitcoin ATM providers. We have Jordan Kelly of Robocoin and Zach Harvey of Lamassu. Also have Mark Santori, who serves as the chairman of the Regulatory Affairs Committee for the Bitcoin Foundation. Here's what our objective for today's webinar. We're hoping to take away discussing general concept of what are really Bitcoin ATMs, how they function, what utility they serve for consumers. We'll also discuss how the regulators are looking at ATM usage in the Bitcoin space and how they're attempting to oversee these new products. We'll touch upon the customer protection and discuss some of the regulatory challenges and issues facing today by Robocoin and Lamassu. We'll also talk about a little bit at the very end about the international landscape for Bitcoin ATM regulation, which is going to be a great segue to next week's final series. A little housekeeping as always. We'll be happy to take questions at the end of the webinar. In the last, it'll take about 5 to 10 minutes. I will now turn over to our panelists. And so let's start off with the very first question. I'm going to turn over to the entire panel. Can you tell us more about what are really Bitcoin ATMs, how they function? It would be helpful if you could discuss to the audience the use and utility for consumers and how really they're different from the traditional ATMs that are currently operating. I'll turn it over to the panel. Thank you.
Sure, I'll lead that one off. So I'd say that Bitcoin ATMs deliver to the consumer the easiest way to access Bitcoin. Really, when we first launched our first machine in Vancouver in October 29th, 2013, a lot of folks called us the on-ramp to Bitcoin. And I think that Zach could probably agree with me that a lot of folks' first experience is, when it comes to Bitcoin, is with the Bitcoin ATM, because they've actually provided some kind of physical, tangible, real touch point that brings something that brings digital currency to a brings it to real life.
Yes, I would definitely agree. They're machines that have a very simple function. It's the function of selling and/or buying Bitcoins. And they're a very simple way to convert paper technology, which is money, paper currency, into digital currency. Um, they are very different from traditional ATMs in the sense that they connect to no traditional financial institutions. So when we're talking about Bitcoin ATMs, they're not really ATMs at all. There are no connection to any banking infrastructure. It's just a way of converting cash into Bitcoin or vice versa.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things we're seeing is these Bitcoin ATMs are starting to evolve into really cool financial tools for people. For people, we are at Robocoin. We really look at solving some of the key problems in the world right now. One of them, two of them, is providing wealth storage solutions to the underbanked, and giving those underbanked, or giving people a really sweet way and a very easy, cheap, friendly way to send money or remit money to friends and family overseas. And because we're using Bitcoin as this tool, almost as a language, as a protocol in between these machines, we have customers now sending, they'll go and deposit $1,000 USD with the intention of having their family member in Hong Kong receive it and sell or cash out for $1,000 equivalent of a Hong Kong dollar.
Right. There are also, there are different ways of obtaining Bitcoin, but there are very few of them that don't require connections to the traditional financial institutions. For instance, Coinbase is a very simple way of obtaining Bitcoin if you sign up with your bank account. If you don't want to sign up to a bank account, that's when cash is needed, and that's where Bitcoin ATMs or Bitcoin vending machines or BTMs, however you like to call them, come in handy.
Let me follow up on that question. This is both Jordan and Zach. You touched upon something that's very unique. You said that the major difference between the traditional ATMs and the Bitcoin ATMs is that the Bitcoin ATMs don't really connect to the traditional financial institution, right? They don't connect to the same network.
Right.
Do you ever see the traditional Bitcoin ATMs adapting to the Bitcoin environment, to the digital currency, cryptocurrency environment, where you would walk up in the future to a traditional ATM to withdraw money, to deposit money, to do a transaction, but you can also do a transaction in digital currency? Do you think we'll ever see that?
I wouldn't expect it anytime soon. I don't think the banks are very excited about adopting Bitcoin. And I think that a lot of the technology providers for the Bitcoin ATMs don't really evolve as quickly as things are moving in a sense in the high-tech technology world. So if you look at how much ATMs have changed in the past 20 years, you'll kind of get the idea of how slow they'll probably be to get on to accepting and integrating cryptocurrencies into their systems. And then you have companies like ours, Lamassu, you have Robocoin, and all of our competitors who are working at this full time and developing things specifically for cryptocurrencies. So it's not something I'd expect to see in the near future.
Yeah, I can get that, but I'm also pretty excited about. I think it's a fun challenge. We're going against, or I shouldn't say we're going against, but we're diving into a market that is very entrenched, very old, a little stodgy, one would say. I don't think so, but I think it's a really fun challenge to see how fast we can encourage and we can actually execute in terms of getting mainstream adoption. And really mainstream adoption means how quickly can we get the entrenched players to buy into this thing. And from our perspective, we've seen a really lucrative opportunity for us to go out and potentially do some interesting partnerships. I think that there's going to be I think it's going to be faster speed to market than maybe Zach would imagine. But I don't know. I'm hopeful. I think it's our job to bring Bitcoin to the world. So I think that going and figuring out those kind of partnerships is going to be a lot of fun.
So part of bringing Bitcoin to the world, which is really segueing to my next question, is providing an opportunity to an average consumer that you you're operating, you're offering a product that is regulated or it has some sense of customer protection feature attached to it. But before we go to the customer protection side, my question is, who really oversees or who wants to oversee Bitcoin ATMs? Now, since I think it's undisputed that Bitcoin ATMs are fairly new products in the marketplace. They've only been in existence for just a few years. Have can you elaborate? Who are the regulators who are looking to regulate? Are you going to be regulated as a money transmitter, money service business, or do you have to become regulated in any other capacity?
Marco, jump in there. This is your bag right here.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. So, hi everyone. My name is Marco Santori. I chair the Bitcoin Foundation's Regulatory Affairs Committee, and I'm saying is getting some notes in the chat that I'm quiet. Okay, so I'm also an attorney in New York City. I represent several Bitcoin companies, from exchanges to payment processors to Bitcoin miners, people launching their own cryptocurrencies, and people doing even more exotic Bitcoin 2.0 type stuff, using the Bitcoin blockchain and the Bitcoin protocol for non-currency uses. But recently, I was the attorney that helped launch the first Bitcoin vending machine in the United States, and the second, and the third as well. So this is a road that my team has been down a couple of times before, and what we're finding is that it's still not clear who the regulators are for Bitcoin ATMs, and it's not clear who they're going to be. Right now, we know that FinCEN is the primary regulator for all money transmitters, and as of a year ago, about a year ago, maybe a little bit more, we know that money transmitters includes exchangers, people who stand in the flow of funds and exchange US dollars or other government currencies for digital currencies like Bitcoin. And that's largely, by and large, it's what the operators of these machines are doing. And you'll see different payment or different structures on sort of the back end of the machine that take into account who's taking custody of the funds, who's taking custody of the dollars versus who's taking custody of the cryptocurrency. And that can sort of change the analysis. But all in all, it's FinCEN on the federal level that's looking at this. Continuing on the federal level, we've seen new interest by CFPB, on the federal level. That's really sort of the latest and greatest. We know that there was a recent Government Accountability Office report that called upon CFPB to increase their oversight in this space. And as a result of that, we saw a recent, I think it was just within the week, CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, just recently released a piece of guidance warning people about the risks of being involved in what they called a Wild West of unregulated cryptocurrencies. And of course, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are not unregulated, but one of the things that they did mention was Bitcoin ATMs. They made certain to call out the fact that, in fact, these are not ATMs. They don't perform, although they are automated machines, they don't perform teller services. They're not hooked up to a bank. And I think there are probably very few people that would actually complete a Bitcoin transaction that would actually not know that going in. But nonetheless, that's the CFPB's job, and that's the alert they gave. So that's what we're looking at on the federal level. There are obviously tax consequences, and so IRS will be involved, and they released guidance a few months ago explaining how Bitcoin transactions are to be treated for income tax purposes. And that's really what we're looking at on the federal level. On the state level, well, you have, if you pull up that slide again on page 4, you'll see the seal for the New York Department of Financial Services. The DFS recently released proposed guidelines, proposed what they'd like to call a bit license that would regulate exchangers of Bitcoin, including most Bitcoin ATM operators operating in New York, or really that quote involve New York. It's the involving test for jurisdiction. And that's just a proposal. We haven't seen what the final laws are going to look like yet. And one of the things that we're doing here is helping clients put together comments on that proposal. But if it's passed, if it becomes effective essentially in the state that we see it today, then Bitcoin ATM operators will be part of that regime, and they'll require a bit license in New York. Other states, it really depends. There are a lot of states out there that we've requested determinations from, and they've come back and said, this is really more like a vending machine. So we don't regulate it, and we're happy to give you this no action letter. And we've had great success with that. We've gotten no action letters for Bitcoin vending machines from several states. Still, others have said, no, we're not really sure how our laws treat Bitcoin kiosks, but we're pretty sure we want to regulate this. So you need to apply for a license. And still others have just not responded. And still others have said, we don't know. Conduct yourself accordingly, which is not tremendously helpful. But this is the landscape as we see it today. So that's where we are. I know that was a little bit long-winded, but hopefully that kind of explains the state of digital currency regulation as it applies to ATMs today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Thank you,
definitely think that was a very good overview by Marco. And I do think that one of the main issues is lack of clarity. So if throughout all of the states there was a clear answer of exactly, yeah, sorry, I'm in the middle of something. Sorry, maintenance. Lacking clarity is one of the main issues. So it's if operators are looking for an answer of, is this legal in my state or not? It's something that in some states there's been more clarity, in some there has been very little. For instance, in Texas, they came out with guidance not long ago, and according to that, Bitcoin machines or Bitcoin ATMs, if they are selling directly from the operator to the user, are not considered to need a money services business license at all. So in Texas, they made it quite clear, and they were talking specifically in many cases about Bitcoin ATMs. And in fact, we in the coming days are going to send a clarification letter to FinCEN arguing that Bitcoin vending machines are not money transmitters because it's only going from the operator to B, the user, as in selling Bitcoin, and not going through a third party that would be the money transmitter. But these are things that it's an extremely new market. It didn't exist a year ago, and clarity is the one thing that I think is missing.
So let me go back to something that Mark had mentioned, which leads to another question. So Marco was very thorough in discussing, what the federal and potential state regulators, touched upon FinCEN, overseeing this industry or attempting to assert jurisdiction. Talked about the recent statements made by the CFPB director, calling it the Wild West. We also touched upon the bit license proposal. So if I'm looking to buy or I'm looking to lease a Bitcoin ATM or vending machine, what should I worry about from the compliance point? I know there's lack of clarity, or the regulatory environment perhaps hasn't been as clear, or it's not as clear today as it probably will be in the future. But if I'm looking to license or purchase this machine or series of machines, what compliance rules should I be concerned about, and how do I deal with these rules?
Well, the first thing you probably want to do is talk to Marco or someone like another attorney that really has a deep understanding of what Bitcoin vending machines or ATMs are and what the compliance is. So even if you kind of have to say, well, we're going to be a little extra careful here, and let's assume that as far as FinCEN is concerned, it is money transmitting, then there's AML and KYC that we have to look at. And then there's the state level, and let's see what their requirements are. And I think that's the main thing that a lot of US operators are looking into is what are the requirements for identification of the users as would be required under money transmission laws.
So at Robocoin, we tried to kind of nip that problem in the bud when we first launched our machine. I think we saw pretty quickly that the regulations were pretty harsh and that there was going to be a very, very large scrutinizing effort when it came to Bitcoin. So again, under the same guise and the same purpose that I said before, trying to bring Bitcoin to the world, we wanted to make the experience for our operators as easy as possible. Meaning that when they go and they present their compliance plan, or they even go and the DFS or whomever it may be, they could go and say, they could be really well prepared to say, you know what, regardless, I am going to adhere to your strictest or your most lenient requirements, irregardless. So it's we really want to try and provide our operators a very seamless solution for their customers to actually go in, be onboarded into a machine and actually have a very easy buying process. Now, given the unfortunate part is that the idea of providing any kind of identification just to buy Bitcoin is cumbersome and tasking. But again, it's kind of it's a necessary evil when you want to play in the United States or when you play, or even when you want to play abroad. So it's an unfortunate line that we all have to walk. But I think right now I think Zach's doing a great job. I think Marco is doing an amazing job right now of helping onboard operators into this murky regulatory environment. But I think making sure that the machines are built from the ground up with the tools necessary to be able to provide their operators seamless solutions to onboarding customers and that meet regulatory scrutiny is very important.
Yeah, and I'm happy to put some color on what the granular requirements are as they apply to Bitcoin kiosk operators. And you hear me switching between terminology, ATM, kiosk, vending machine. I mean, it sort of depends on the tone that you're looking to take, and I guess what regulator you're speaking to at the time. But all in all, we're talking about the same machines, and these machines come part and parcel with a few core regulatory concerns. The first of those is, of course, the identity collection, verification, and reporting requirements that are found in the Bank Secrecy Act and the Patriot Act. Above a certain dollar threshold, Bitcoin ATM operators are required to collect first name, last name, address, and date of birth of their customers, and in some cases report that information to the federal government. There's a second tier there that is a lower tier. It actually applies to all businesses and all U.S. persons. It has to do with OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, that publishes a list of ne'er-do-wells, a list of enemies of the state, criminals, known money launderers, that sort of thing, sanctioned individuals, and also sanctioned jurisdictions with which no United States person is permitted to do business with. Now, does that mean that everybody in the U.S. checks that list before they do business with anybody, whether they be inside the U.S. or outside the U.S.? The answer is no, of course not. You can go and buy an ice cream or a hot dog or even a pair of khakis at Banana Republic, and they don't ask for your name. But Bitcoin operators are under the same laws, operate under the very same laws as everybody else on that front, just enhanced scrutiny. So you'll see that even for low dollar thresholds, Bitcoin ATM operators will often require a name from their customers, even if they don't actually verify that name by scanning an ID, taking a palm vein scan in the case of the Robocoin ATMs, or photographing a passport in the case of the Lamassu ATMs. It's not always done, and that's because the BSA asks us to take a risk-based approach. So there are actually very few dollar thresholds in the Bank Secrecy Act, and they asked us to say, look, take a look at your own risk profile and prescribe your own thresholds, monetary thresholds, and apply those procedures.
So we try. Let me just hop in there real fast. We try to make this process consumer friendly, and I think that's the biggest challenge: is how can we make this onboarding process super easy from the customer standpoint. When you go to a bank and you want to sign up for a bank account, it's a very tasking, arduous process where you actually have to go in, you have to meet a guy, you give him an ID, he compares your face, and really we try to just recreate that experience without and remove the teller. I think Zach's doing a great job doing the same thing. I would just say that our process is pretty cool in that when a customer actually enrolls for the first time, they go through a 5-step process. They enter their phone, they create a PIN, they scan their palm, they scan their ID. We take a picture of their face and we match the face from in front of the kiosk with the face on the ID. That 5-step process only happens one time, and then from there on, it's enter a phone number, enter in a PIN, and scan your palm. And at that point, the operator of the machine has full customer visibility of who he's doing business with, but most importantly, that customer is not able to actually structure transactions anymore, which is one of the big, anti-money laundering red flags. So, I think we've done a pretty good job of making a pretty friendly customer experience and melding it nicely with full KYC and AML compliance.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do with our system is the similar kind of idea of making it very simple for the end user to, when required, to enter as identifying info as may be necessary. And we just work with third-party services such as Ideology, Identity9, etc., who do all the work on the other side. So they're the ones who will be taking the information and checking them to see if they're on any of the lists that Marco mentioned. They'll be the ones doing the reports at the end of the month. They're the experts. And then once they've done full verification, the next time you just scan a card with only your name, it can run it through the system and say, hey, you know what, you're good to go. And then it would be a process that would take maybe 5 seconds instead of 30 or 40 seconds.
Jordan, what do you feel today of the biggest regulatory challenges that your companies are facing, and how are you handling these challenges?
I would say, hop in there, Zach.
All right, sure. As I mentioned before, it's mostly clarity issues. That's the big thing. I want to be able, if there were clear answers out there, we could collect them, and anytime a new potential operator would write us an inquiry, we'd be able to say, well, what states are you interested in operating? Here, let me give you a list of basically what you have to do according to past experience, etc. And the fact that there is no clarity means that there are just a whole bunch of I don't knows. Let's try. Here are some guys you can talk to and try to get an answer. Here are some other operators in your state that have done this, but they're not sure either. And I would say that's the biggest hurdle at this point.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Clarity is a real bummer when it comes to operators having a good idea. People are investing. Operators are investing thousands, tens of thousands of dollars into this business, and and a lack of clarity creates a barrier to entry for them. When they realize this business is pretty cool. Right now, Robocoin operators are breaking even on their machine in less than 9 months. We're doing north of on average anywhere between $40,000 to $70,000 in transactions on a monthly basis. I mean, guys are doing some pretty mean business here, and they're very excited about throwing their hat in the ring and starting to build out a fleet of machines. Again, the problem comes in to, if I'm going to invest 15, 25, 100, 150, $1 million into this business, where, what am I, what if the band hammer comes down and I lose my position? Or more importantly, or not necessarily more importantly, but equally of importance, what happens if regulation comes in and I'm not prepared? So again, at Robocoin, we really tried to address that from the beginning, so that way our enrollment process from an AML and a KYC and overall regulatory standpoint, we really wanted to make sure that we addressed and we dotted all of our I's and crossed all of our T's to make sure that our operators are their businesses are future proofed against any kind of regulation. So again, we want to just try to make the operator experience easy, but hopefully regulators will do the same thing and make their lives easy as well, because they're definitely delivering value to the consumer.
I think one other thing that I'd like to mention is that in the US, it's not only a matter of lack of clarity, it's also a matter of how aggressive the US has been in the past in as far as financial legislation is concerned and financial regulation. So you have places such as, well, even Canada, but a lot of places in Europe where if you're not 100% certain or didn't get a great answer from your regulators, you're just going to go start and wait for them to tell you, hey, you know what, you've got to change this. This is the way we want you to do it. And in the US, if you go ahead and do that, you're risking possible incarceration and indictment. So I think that's something that scared away a lot of potential operators. And I can tell you, I mean, we've sold 250 machines throughout the world. We've sold 60 to Canada, and probably about a third of that to the US, maybe 20, 30 machines to the US, even though, the US is incredibly entrepreneurial, huge market, and yet people are being very careful because they don't want to end up in a cell just for trying to do the right thing.
Let me ask the panel the same question I asked in the previous two webinars. Do you feel the industry would benefit by having its own SRO, self-regulatory organization?
Well, this is Marco. I think that a lot of industries would benefit from something like that, and I think almost all industries would benefit from something like that, depending upon the maturity of the industry. So one of the things that we've been saying at the foundation for a long time, and one of the themes I try to stress just in individual and informal discussions with regulators and policymakers, is that Bitcoin is a baby in its crib right now, and we don't know we don't know what it's going to grow up to be. That's I think a phrase that Patrick Merck, General Counsel of the Foundation, coined a long time ago. But I think it's particularly important here. So we use that principle to argue against technology-specific regulation. Say, look, Bitcoin is so brand new, it doesn't make sense to regulate something in a different way just because it's using Bitcoin technology. So any specifically tailored regulation, we've argued in the past, is just doomed to fail. It's doomed to stifle innovation, and it's doomed to not achieve the policy goals that its authors want it to achieve. And that same reasoning applies, I think, to an SRO. I think that yes, at some point, it makes sense to regulate Bitcoin to regulate Bitcoin products and the delivery of Bitcoin products. At the same time, in fact, at that exact same time, it might also make sense to ask the industry to regulate itself. And I think that time is not right now. I think that time is coming. I don't believe that it is now. That's sort of the long and short of my opinion on potential self-regulatory organizations.
Marco, since you were heavily involved with the Bitcoin Foundation and chair the Regulatory Affairs Committee. Do you mind shedding a little bit of light what the Bitcoin Foundation is doing to educate the public, consumers, and also regulators in helping to navigate the very gray, uncertain regulatory um, side of the space? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. For the last, say, year and a half now, since before I was actually involved in the foundation on the regulatory side, um, the foundation has been working fairly closely with the regulators, and I know that the crypto anarchists in the room will probably are sort of, I think they're off the boat at this point already. But we've been working closely with the regulators to try to help them to understand what Bitcoin is, who the industry players are, what the goals are, how the technology works, etc. It's our view that without something like that, we will have obtrusive, stifling regulations that are generally uninformed, and we'll have those real quick. In fact, we would likely by now already have anti-Bitcoin legislation if it wasn't for the work that the industry is doing individually and that the foundation is assisting with. But to speak specifically on the federal level, we'll say that last summer we were invited after FinCEN passed its famous guidance on virtual currencies. FinCEN invited the foundation to present to pretty much every three-letter financial agency in DC, and I guess the four-letter agencies as well: FDIC, Comptroller of the Currency, IRS, DEA, CIA, FBI, obviously FinCEN. Most of Treasury was there. Most of the departments of Treasury were there, I should say, and some legislators as well. They really packed the room, and we spent hours there just explaining how Bitcoin works, explaining it, just the technology behind it, explaining investigative methodologies, how investigators can use the Bitcoin blockchain to root out illegal activity after it happens and to potentially interdict activity before it happens. And that was sort of the beginning of a conversation that started a year and a half ago. And since then, in addition to meeting with regulators in my private practice, which I do regularly, I met with them in the capacity of the foundation, talking about things like the travel rule, how the travel rule ought to apply to Bitcoin businesses and to which Bitcoin businesses it ought to apply to, if any, and in what circumstances. That's sort of a hot topic right now in DC. And as far as with whom we've been speaking, it's usually Treasury acting as an intermediary with one of its bureaus, FinCEN. Also, this sort of DC death march of staffers on the Hill. You'll see that there are some legislators in DC that already have very strong opinions on Bitcoin. Most of them right now are thankfully too busy with other things to really give Bitcoin any attention at all. And in my mind, that's a good thing. It's better that the industry have the time it needs to innovate and to solve a lot of the problems, and to sort of innovate away the problems that the regulators want to regulate away. The more time we have, the better in my mind. But in the meantime, we have regular meetings sort of across the board on the federal level. And it's something that I think we're going to be continuing doing into the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Marco. We have one more question, and we're going to start taking transition over to the Q&A section. So please feel free to submit your questions to the main forum. And this question is for all the panelists. As the Bitcoin ATM environment is growing, evolving, what are your thoughts about the international landscape? I know that the participants, the panelists on this call are located in the U.S., but clearly Bitcoin is a very international product per se. So perhaps you could discuss the international regulatory landscape, the marketplace outside of the U.S., and would like to hear your thoughts on that.
All right,
I think the land.
you can go ahead.
I'll just jump in real fast. I think that the global landscape is really exciting, as we all know, or as many of us know. Bitcoin is another universal language that everybody can speak, and that it brings international commerce together. It brings everybody. It brings everybody one step closer. I think it's very peaceful and harmonious technology and tool and protocol that we can all use. So making it as easy as possible for people to adopt is really, really important, and making that consumer experience seamless and frictionless is really important. And also, again, working with and hopefully pushing regulators in the right direction of let's wait and see, let's make sure that we understand what we're doing before we really regulate this thing. It's very important. So, but that being said, I think that the regulatory landscape on the global scale has been, I would say, is much more mellow than it is, say, in the United States. Whereas in the U.S., anti-money laundering is paramount. Protection in the EU is absolutely of the utmost importance. So we try and take both of those very, very seriously, and try and find a happy medium between all of it.
Yeah, I think it really varies from country to country. We have Lamassu operators in Australia that have talked to their regulators and said, yes, we don't have to do anything. This isn't. There are no AML KYC requirements. There are countries where it's very simple. There are countries where there's, say, maybe a $3,000 limit, or up to $3,000. You don't have to do anything. We have other European countries that it's up to 15,000 euro, that there are no requirements whatsoever. And then there are countries that are the exact opposite. We've shipped a machine to Ecuador, and 2 days after they received it, Ecuador released new legislation that basically bans Bitcoin completely. We have operators in Russia that are waiting to see what's happening and are not launching at this point. So it really is a matter of it's very country specific. But I would say overall, it is a lot easier and a lot to launch a Bitcoin ATM abroad than it is in the U.S.
Again, I think that it's really important for the manufacturer of the machine, or the provider of these machines, Robocoin, Lamassu, whoever it may be. I think that it's really important that we all align expectations with operators and say, like, hey man, or hey operator, this is definitely a delicate business. We are indeed, right now it's being regulated as money transmission. So we need to adhere to those standards, and we need to make sure that we set the bar, or I should say we meet the regulations, so that way these businesses don't get shut down, and more importantly, Bitcoin doesn't get a bad brand. The worst thing that can happen is that it is the exact situation, is the Ecuador situation, where they just ban Bitcoin. It's a very egregious and unnecessary stance. And I think that generally those stances come with a lack of education, but also, sometimes folks are bad actors, and and governments see that, they see the potential of it, and they don't see a solution. So we need to be very, very, very good about providing the solution. We need to say, hey, if you have regulations that say you need ID and whatever, a form of identification before a customer can transact, let's provide those forms, and let's be very transparent about those, and let's be open. Let's put those in front of the government, and let's say, hey, you know what? We want to make Bitcoin very accessible. We think that it's an amazing tool that's going to help the world improve. So let's no matter what, let's bring it to the world.
Marco, maybe you could actually shed some light what the Bitcoin Foundation is doing on the international regulatory side. I don't know if you're involved in that, and if you are, um, how does
Yeah, I can shed some
what
light
is
on
the
it. I'm
Bitcoin
not.
Foundation doing to get
Yeah, I'm not.
greater acceptance?
I'm not directly involved in that, but um, I can tell you that the foundation started as a U.S. entity, and of course, sort of the informal motto of the Bitcoin Foundation is decentralize all the things. And so we've made a real effort to ensure that this is not a U.S. centric organization. And over the past several months, we've broadened the horizons of just the makeup of the organization to include affiliates, international affiliates, where the US chapter is really just another affiliate. And there was a global Bitcoin Foundation organization. And I may be not putting the right spin on this or getting all the details right. I would encourage you to reach out to the international affiliate director at the foundation to get the sort of close granular information on it. But we have chapters in England. We have a chapter in Mexico. We have a chapter in Canada. We're opening chapters all around the world, and those chapters will be able to drive their own local outreach efforts. Um, Certainly better than some U.S. attorney would be able to drive outreach in Japan. So that's something that takes time to set up. It took the foundation some time to put the regulatory affairs committee together, and then once we did, things started moving at a pretty brisk pace. But once these international affiliates start getting set up, we're going to see more activity from them. And I think we've already seen good activity from the Bitcoin Foundation in Canada, which has already produced a couple of documents to circulate in the Canadian government. So it's underway. It's unfortunately not moving as fast in other countries, but that's probably has a lot to do with the fact that the regulation in other countries isn't moving as fast as the regulation in the U.S. So things are moving along at, I think, the appropriate clip on the international front.
Thank you, Marco. One of the questions coming from the audience is what role do banks play in EML program for ATM businesses?
I think that you asked the first question you asked are who are the regulators for Bitcoin ATMs, and I told you, and I gave you the the lawyerly answer, but I'll give you the real answer now, and the real regulators are the banks. Juan Janos on my committee, who also has a position in BitReserve, has a great article on this, and he says, look, we can talk about the regulations all we want, but the real gatekeepers here are the banks. And cash management for my clients is one of the most difficult, one of the most challenging hurdles, I'll say, for a Bitcoin ATM. You got to manage the cash, and without a bank that is willing to bank you, you got a real problem. And I think that I can sort of give you the dark story without any spin, but I'll let the Coke and Pepsi of the Bitcoin ATM world, I'll let them speak to it, speak to possible solutions for that.
Jordan,
All right.
do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that banks have been an issue in some places more than others. New Zealand recently came up in that regard, that they had some, I believe it may have been a Robocoin operator, but our operators have also had a bit of trouble with the banks in New Zealand. And the question comes up, well, if the banks don't want to have anything to do with Bitcoin businesses, how do you run a Bitcoin ATM business? There's cash in, and then or cash out. What do you do with that cash? How do you get it back into Bitcoin, etc., from the operator's point of view? And there was actually a very interesting article that was put out shortly after that by Justice Renver, who was talking about an option for completely bankless Bitcoin ATM. And the idea would be to recycle the in and out in a way that the price would work according to the ins and outs, to the sells and the buys of Bitcoin. So each ATM, in a sense, or each Bitcoin ATM would have its own price, and then, of course, arbitrage would come in. And that was actually, it's an exciting idea, and I think it's something that eventually can evolve. But these machines can work completely independent of the banking system, at least potentially. So if it ever does come to that, our machines can be just as effective. And that's one of the beautiful things about cash. You don't need financial institutions when you're using cash. You only need them when you have to go through virtual fiat currency. When you're using hard money, you can start getting creative.
Yeah, if you take a look at some of our new analysis, we have 2 recycler units coming out, and I think those are going to be really cool in terms of lending a hand to reducing those bank calls or even cash calls. So right now, an operator has to go and move $25,000 from his cash acceptor back into his dispenser if he had a big sell day, or vice versa. And with these new recyclers, and there's some really cool ones out there. So I think ours are really state of the art. These guys can, they can eat 20 bills at one time, and but the very awesome thing about them is that they recycle them. So they actually organize all of the notes. So if you put in 100, a 20, and a 10 to buy $130 worth of Bitcoin, all of that cash will be recycled. And then let's say another customer walks up a few minutes later and they want to cash out, they want $20. The machine can just, it'll recycle that 130 and provide the 20 to that next customer. I think that the cash recycling technology is going to be really, really, really friendly when it comes to minimizing the amount of cash to bank, bank to cash, or I'm sorry, ATM, grabbing your cash from the ATM, bringing it to your bank, sending that cash up to your Bitcoin exchange, or replenishing your liquidity. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool technologies coming out. But I think that what you're talking about right there, Zach, with introducing some network effects and arbitraging through machines is very, very novel. We should have a conversation about that sometime soon.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take one last question and we'll wrap up this webinar. We have a question, if you just bear with me. Why build custom hardware for Bitcoin ATMs when there are so many existing manufacturers of high quality ATMs already in payments? I think that's more for
So
Zach.
yeah, that's a good question, and really I would say a few things. Number one, it was all about trying to figure out whether or not there would be a product market fit. And this was a great way to kind of prototype this business model, was to kind of build it ourselves. We have some great partners in the kiosk manufacturing industry that have helped us build great machines. From there, I think that now that we have a really good understanding of the market and what it takes to succeed, but more importantly, now that we see how fantastic the business is in terms of the amount of capital and how lucrative Robocoin operations can be, we can now kind of take our model and apply it to a variety of different other verticals, especially in the ATM game. And fortunately, we've got a full dedicated software team that is just building, I think, some of the phenomenal platform for us to really help bring Bitcoin, not just to Robocoin machines, but to potentially all machines around the world. It's a very exciting future.
Yeah, for us, it's a brand new Bitcoin's a brand new technology. We wanted to create a machine that fits all the advantages of Bitcoin. We always were big believers in minimalism and not having more than you need. We wanted the easiest user experience. And to be honest, I don't think that there is a lot of great hardware out there for Bitcoin ATMs. So I think it is the kind of thing where you have to start from scratch and think, well, how do we want this to work? What does this have to do? When you look at a standard ATM, how long does a transaction take you? If you want to take out some money, it'll take you probably a minute or longer. Our machines can take 10, 15 seconds. So it's really an idea of rethinking everything. And that's why we started from scratch.
Well, thank you everybody for your time and a special thanks to our panelists, Jordan, Zach, and Marco. We
Thanks
hope
for
you
having
enjoyed.
us.
It's a pleasure, and we hope you will join us for the last and final regulatory webinar series hosted by Payment Week next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can sign up for it on paymentweek.com. Thank you and have a nice day.